Hi, welcome. Today we've got Josh Kuykendall, founder of the Appalachian Aces, with us. Going to talk a little travel baseball and recruiting. Appreciate you being with us, Josh.
Thanks for having me. This is always an honor for me to be invited to do this. Love looking forward to talking to you guys.
Sure. So you've got your fingerprints all over baseball in West Virginia. There's not much happening that Mr. Kuykendall isn't involved with. So uh, before we get into all that, tell me a little bit about your background, where you played, how you got to where you're at.
Played high school. I started in Frankfurt High School, then moved to Kaiser my senior year. After Kaiser, I signed with and played for Coach Little, Doug Little at Potomac State. After 2 years there, I had a lot of success. Moved on to play for Cal Bailey at West Virginia State. Had 2 good years there, and really just kind of moved on from baseball per se, and got into the working world, and started at a sales job at Enterprise Rent a Car. Worked my way up a couple years there. Moved on to Coca-Cola bottling company as a sales rep, and then moved moved on from that on to Cintas, selling workwear uniforms, and that's kind of what I've been doing. I no longer work for Cintas. I work for another company, but that's kind of what I've been doing, and getting back into baseball in 2016. I was offered a opportunity to join Coach Little and Coach Schaefer's staff at Potomac State. Spent 2 years there. Learned a lot from those guys. I really owe them a ton of just very thankful to learn under them.
Man, he's the
And
best, isn't he? Man, Coach
yeah,
Little, he's awesome.
both. Yeah, those guys are just you know guys that you hope that as you grow into the game, and you're never done learning. You're always learning something new, and just being able to pick those guys' brains on a daily basis was just phenomenal. Then I was afforded an opportunity in right around the state tournament in 2018. I reached out to Greg up in Pennsylvania. He at the time had the rights to PBR West Virginia and PBR Pennsylvania. Just covering, Pennsylvania is such a big state. He wasn't able to really cover West Virginia, so I just, it's all God's timing. Is I'm a big believer in our Lord and Savior, and He, put me in a great position to, start with the state tournament in 2018 was actually my first. I think I was about a week into it. And I went down with Greg, and we covered the state tournament. And that's kind of when the whole ball started rolling. I joke around and tell guys during our Aces team meetings that I was sitting at a buddy's house in a driveway when the idea of the Appalachian Aces kind of came to me from a organizational standpoint. It was, hey, I was thinking, what can I do to not just be a guy who comes in and does events for PBR West Virginia. What can I do to help kids more than that? And the idea kind of came upon me in the driveway of my buddy's house. It was, I had some really good contacts in college through my time at Potomac State when I was coaching. I was able to build really good relationships, and I just, Coach Little was the first one I reached out to and said, hey, I got this idea. What if I could get 15 of the best of the top high school players in the state, and would you guys consider playing us in the fall? And in West Virginia, it probably wouldn't work in a place like Pennsylvania or a place like Ohio that just has so many schools and they have so many players. But with West Virginia, being on limited recruiting budgets, the coaches, the college coaches all do a great job, but an opportunity to bring 15 or 20 of the best high school players to them, where they don't have to single-handedly go out and spend a Wednesday going to see one kid and a Thursday going to see one kid. During the spring, we could bring them all to them, have them. It's kind of a win-win for everybody because the kids get to see, the program. They get to see how they operate, how they talk to their players, how they coach. And then from a standpoint of the colleges, it's, they get to see how the kids react during games, how how they act in the batter's box, how they compete on the mound. When they make an error, how they respond to that. That's a big thing. So
now that first year that you guys did, you had some interesting things going on with who you played and how you set that up. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah. So back to, I reached out to Coach Little, and, he said, yeah, we'd be interested. Then I just kind of moved down the ladder. Coach Lloyd, who I had a relationship with at State, said, hey, I got this idea. They, at the time, I don't know if it's changed. At the time, they were allowed to play 4 outside opponents in the fall. And, he was on board. And then I reached out to Coach Wright at UC, and kind of gave him the idea. He was on board, then moved on to, Concord. Those guys were on board. West Virginia Wesleyan was on board. Davis and Elkins.
What you're talking about is actually your travel team playing the college teams as part of their fall schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. So awesome. When I started, when I was playing in high school, I always loved playing against older competition. Like, that was, to me, as a 15-year-old, if I could go play 17 or 18-year-olds, and kind of see where I stack up, I just love to compete. So I thought that, this might be a good idea. It'll give kids a taste of what college baseball is about on the weekends. I mean, obviously we're so spread out, we couldn't practice during the week, but it gave the kids an opportunity to go see what a doubleheader on a Saturday and a doubleheader on a Sunday look like. Because that's kind of what in the spring, in college baseball, man, it's doubleheader Saturday, doubleheader Sunday, an off day maybe on Monday, practice Tuesday, a midweek game Wednesday, practice Thursday, and then depending on what conference you're playing in, it's probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, to be honest with you, I got incredibly lucky with the players we got. I mean, whenever you can roll out guys that are 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", 210 pounds to 250 pounds that, just hit the ball all over the park and are able to get guys that are 4 or 5 or 6 years older than them out on the mound, that's immediately going to give you, some credibility. So super thankful to the parents that kind of gave me a shot and kind of let me pitch my dream to them. And it all worked out for those guys. They all had good offers coming out of that fall. Every kid on that team, I believe, moved on to a college program. And, the single most thing that really set us up for success was our first college weekend. We played in Seton Hill, a tournament up there against the Allegheny Pirates in the full circuit power out of Buffalo area. And, they kind of beat us like a drum a little bit. The Allegheny Pirates are sponsored by the Pittsburgh Pirates, so they've got, draft prospects on their team. And, our guys kind of struggled against, especially on the mound, getting those guys out. And the next weekend we went and played Salem. We played Ohio Valley. So Salem on Saturday, Ohio Valley on Sunday. And we swept 4 games, 2-2 from those guys. And from that point on, we got everyone's best pitching. We faced all the best players because no one wanted to lose to us, obviously. And to me, it kind of made me sick to my stomach because that's, we want to win, but I'm not trying to go and, I don't want to embarrass anybody by any means. They're nice enough to play us and let us come to their facility and see it and play on it. So,
sure.
But it ended up being really good because everyone kind of took us serious. That year our guys saw Will Wyatt at Concord, who was 94, 95. Last year we saw, can't remember his name off the top of my head, from UC, but he was 93, 94. I mean, you just can't simulate those reps for kids. In high school baseball, it's like, hey, if I get a fastball for a strike 0-1, then he's probably going to throw a breaking ball in the dirt. I'm going to swing over it or I'm going to take it. Well, in college, it's like, here's 90 on the inner half, here's 90 on the outer half, you're 0-2, and then you're probably swinging at something that's not a very good pitch. So our kid, the good thing, I love to see the kids compete. And I think looking back on it, if you ask those guys, Caleb Taylor and Devon Neal, Colton Matthews, and those guys that played that first year, looking back on that 3 years later now, I think that they would echo probably the same thing, that, it really helped them. They've had a lot of success. I know Caleb and Devon have at Potomac State, and, Carter Lyles is another one who, from Scott, he, had a big fastball, and he's moved on to WVU, and it's gotten even better for him now. But
He's
I
gonna
think
be a
that,
dude.
yeah, he sure is. And I think that if you asked him, I think he would say that, playing those older guys, and, there was a weekend where, guys hit him pretty hard, and he, not used to that. And I think it's really helped him, in a little way, I'm sure. He's a really good player, but,
Right.
he's going to be a guy that, WVU counts on to get outs, in the Big 12. So,
So you started that fall, just one team, just a fall team, and then, fast forward, what are the Aces today?
Oh man. So yeah, we started with one team. I never, I never dreamed of it getting, I don't want it to get too big, because that takes away from what I'm trying to do. So right now where I have it is kind of where I think I want to be with it from an older team standpoint. So this fall, we've got 5 teams. We've got an all 2023 team, Coach Galuski, a lot of North Central West Virginia kids, a couple Southern kids on that team. They've got some really good players. They've got a couple WVU commits on that team, so they can compete with anybody. And from there, we've got a coach, Tyler Skidmore, has a team who played at Bridgeport, Potomac State, and then Fairmont State. And then we've got
I like Skid.
Yeah, Coach Crawford has a team. Josh Crawford from Romney, who's coached their Legion team for 5 or 6 years now. He has a team. Those 2 teams are primarily 22s, and there's a couple 21s and a couple 23s here and there, but it's mostly 22s. And then we got the North and the South. So the South is coached by Zach Baldwin, who coaches with the Hounds during the spring, and Caleb Stewart, who coaches with the Hounds in the spring or the summer. So, those guys kind of take care of the Southern, the Kanawha. We get a lot of kids from Kanawha Valley. We got a couple kids from Kentucky, but it's mostly the Kanawha Valley into, the Huntington area. And we got the North team, Coach John Lowry Jr. and my brother Charlie kind of head that team. And they're very competitive. Both teams all 5 teams really. We had Aces weekend a couple weekends ago down in Charleston, and it was very competitive, which was great. But like I tell the players, there's pretty much all the kids on the Skidmore and the Crawford team. That's not a lower tier team. Those guys could play on the North and the South team. We just didn't have room for them on those teams. So with losing the spring season this past year, I had a lot of kids and families reach out to me, good players that wanted to do something in the fall, and was just, lucky enough to. My biggest thing from an organizational standpoint is I'm not just going to put somebody in the coaching role that doesn't belong there. So, that can set, a program back a long time if you kind of take that approach to it. So, I've got to have guys that I can trust, and the 6, 7, 8 guys I have now, I can trust to where I know that they're always going to do the right thing, and they're never going to put, the brand in jeopardy by doing something they shouldn't do. So, that's what it's all about for me. I believe in, like JT always says, investing in your people, and your programs around you. And I'm I'm grateful to have such good people, because without them, we wouldn't be where we're at right now. And I'll do anything for those guys, because JT was lucky enough to move on and get a job, a paid head coaching job. I think he's 26 now, or 27 maybe. And, that doesn't happen a lot in college baseball. So whenever you got, guys like him and Coach Koala at Potomac State, he's an assistant, he's been highly sought after. There's been some guys that have been close to offering him jobs. That's how I know I'm doing the right thing. A lot of programs would kind of try to hold on to those guys and kind of deter them from moving on. But to me, it's a sign of I'm getting the right people, because they're doing a good job. People, want to do that.
Yeah, so you're talking about having quality baseball guys. Talk about how those coaches and yourself, how that works in the recruiting process, and what the Aces brings to a family or a player that steps into the organization.
So, So what kind of ties into having the right people in the organization is, college coaches, when they reach out, to me, I talk to college coaches almost every day, in one form or fashion. And what they want players that obviously can play, that are good athletes that can help them win games. That's really the most important thing. But, they need to trust the opinion, because especially with the, recruiting regulations right now,
yeah,
they need to have someone that they trust, say, hey, this kid, can, we think he can play at your level. He can help you win games. I talk to Coach Sabins, once every couple of weeks usually. And he can't be out on the road. The Division I, just got extended today to
January
1st. So, it's like those guys are, they're not recruiting. They're having to rely heavily on guys that they trust. And from an organizational standpoint, I can't promote to coaches guys that, aren't good fits for them, or, are question marks per se, because, I can't lose their trust. So I would never do that. And that ties into the coaches I have, they're all trustworthy. If a college coach calls them and asks them their opinion, they're going to be 100% straightforward and honest with them.
So talk to me a little bit about how the actual communication part works. So for someone who doesn't know, I joined this travel team. We're going to go play places, but a lot of times coaches may not call me. They're calling my coach. They're talking to them. And then what happens after that, or how does that process work?
So just to give you an example, from I think West Virginia has 10 or 11 Division II schools, just off the top of my head, in one JUCO, and then, 2 Division I. So coaches, I've got a great relationship, obviously, with Coach Lloyd, because I've known him at West Virginia State since I was playing there when he was an assistant. So, he will, reach out to me and say, hey, what do you have on, X player, what's your thoughts on him? And basically what I'm going to say is 100% honest, because he's counting on me to be 100% honest with him. So,
or he's not calling back next time.
Or he's not going to call me. Yeah. So, and that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having, what we do. So it's really what I tell parents is, you can go play for these big organizations, and you can travel to Florida and Georgia and Texas, and that's all great. I never deter kids from doing that if they want to do it. But when it comes down to it, the bottom line, you need to have someone who coaches can trust that are pushing your son's name in front of them and saying, hey, this kid can play for you. He's a scholarship level talent. You need to either come see him, or you need to get on him, soon. So, that's the big thing I tell parents is you can play for any organization you want. If that's your fancy, that's great. But if they're not pushing, and promoting your son to schools, then it's a lot harder, because just going and playing is not going to get it done, especially in today's world. So it's, that's kind of what we kind of pride ourselves on is, coach picks up the phone and calls John Lowry Jr., who's a former, Division I assistant recruiting coordinator. He's going to be 100% honest 100% of the time. So, he's either going to say, hey, this kid can play for you, or hey, I don't think this kid would be a good fit. That's what it's all about for me. And that's why it's so important from an organization is to have the right people, to where coaches want to call your guys, because then, it just helps the players more than going and playing games. A lot of times, in the day and age we're in, it's all about who's promoting you and who's talking to coaches, on your behalf and on your son's behalf.
So what do you see as some of the mistakes? You're around through PBR and through the Aces and all that. I mean, you're around a lot of players and parents. What are some of the big mistakes you see guys and their parents making?
I'd say the biggest mistake is parents emailing coaches. That's like a huge no-no. And just sheerly on the fact, because, if a player wants to be noticed, or if he has an interest in a school, like the coach wants to communicate with the player. He doesn't want to communicate with the parent. And that's just 100% of the college coaches I've spoken to. They don't want to deal with parents from a standpoint of their son. Obviously, if they have a question or something not included, in the recruiting process, that's different. But
sure, yeah,
that's probably the biggest mistake I've seen is, and parents, they want their kids to have, and I understand. If I wouldn't have known any better, I would do the same thing with my kids are starting to soon be in that age in the next 5 or 10 years. So obviously I'm in a position where I kind of get to see a lot of what should be done and what maybe I shouldn't do. So it's biggest mistake I would say is parents reaching out to college coaches, especially if it's during the recruiting process and they're not committed to the school or the program, and they're not a part of the program yet.
So in looking at the whole travel, a lot of times I'll get questions that say, hey, I really don't want to spend all the money for travel. Is it really worth it? Is playing for a travel team, why can't I just play? I'm just going to play local ball. How do you answer that question? What are the benefits that you see, not just in recruiting, but all around for players joining and getting out there and playing at that level?
Yeah, so, I tell everyone during we have a team meeting before, our teams have team meetings before every season, whether it's the fall or the summer. And what I tell parents is, this might not be for everybody. The benefit of playing for the Aces is you're going to play against really good competition. You're going to get really good reps. You're going to get, we play in events that are higher level exposure events. So PBR Pennsylvania does a great job. PBR Ohio does a great job promoting guys. So, and then obviously PBR West Virginia is starting to get into the tournament side of things. It's all geared around getting as many eyes on your guys or your son or your kid as we can. So, there's nothing wrong with playing a local league. If your goal is to, hey, I want to play for this one college and, I don't think travel is where I should spend my money. That's going to be the case in some kids in their families. So, I try to do everything I can for kids, and there's kids that's played for the Aces that have moved on and played for another organization that I still, if they reach out to me or if a coach calls me about them, I've always been 100% honest. And, that's kind of my goal for baseball in West Virginia. It's not to harm kids by any means. For if you don't play for the Aces, that's a moot point. What I'm trying to do is offer kids an opportunity to play on a competitive team where you're going to get good reps. Unfortunately, some of the local leagues, the competition might not be as competitive, and if you want to play at a higher level, you kind of got to get used to playing guys that are better than you. So
it's not only but it's not only you're playing against the other guys getting better. It's the college coaches need to see you play against good competition, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's the big stigma against West Virginia high school baseball is, outside of Kanawha Valley and, the Eastern Panhandle is, what kind of competition are they facing? I talked to two pro scouts within the last 2 weeks about a player in West Virginia, and, it was less about his physical tools because they've seen him, but it was, hey, what kind of makeup does he have? What kind of competition does he face? And unfortunately, West Virginia being such a small populated state, there's, in Pennsylvania, you might go 20 square miles and, there might be 500 good, 200 or 300 good baseball players in that space. So it's, or high level players, I should say. So West Virginia it's just kind of a little different. So that's why it's important from a parent standpoint to, get your kid and if the Aces aren't, a good fit for you, then finding that organization that you'll play good competition to where, you can really see where your son stacks up against, kids and players that are better than him or good as or better than them. So
you're in the thick of it. So I ask this question, I get a lot of broad answers, but what do you consider kind of the dark side of recruiting?
The dark side of recruiting from a college standpoint.
It can be any aspect of it. Any of it that's just kind of like, man, makes you want to kind of wash your hands and go, man, that's tough.
Well, from a organizational standpoint, the dark side of recruiting is, is when teams are recruiting players for an organization. Unfortunately, parents are sometimes led to believe something that, might not be the case. And unfortunately, there's some organizations that, really care about the bottom line, and, they might not care as much about, getting your son to, a good, into the right fit. They might be more worried about something else. So that's kind of, from my standpoint, I hate when parents are, told something that might not, might be what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear. But, like I said, I never deter kids. If parents call me and say, hey, perfect example, Drew Bailey in the summer, 2023 from Bridgeport, he was set to play with us in the summer on our 2023 team. And he was offered an opportunity to play for 5-star national this summer. So, his dad called me and we talked, and I said, hey, that's, I wouldn't pass that opportunity up. That's an incredible opportunity. So whenever you're talking about playing for a national team, not just 5-star national, but, a Canes national or, top tier, their national team, it's a whole different ball game from a, talent standpoint. And, those are things you can't pass up. Now, every organization.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say every organization has, more regional teams. And, some organizations sell their, that's their, they run it like their national team. So that's kind of the dark side of recruiting for me.
Hey, we've had 500 guys go D1, but nobody from this specific team ever went. So, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things. I mean, it is what it is.
So tell me a little bit about, as parents, they're in that kind of middle school range and they're getting ready to head into high school. What is the age you see it all from where you're sitting, from a college coach reaching out? What age do they really need to maybe start investing in a legitimate travel program and really trying to reach out? Do they need to be doing that at, playing in California at 9 years old? Or do you see a sweet spot there age wise that they really need to kind of start getting out there?
Well, my personal suggestion, and this is, Josh Kuykendall, being, if I was talking to another parent, I would say it all depends on your kid's skill level. So if your son is, the best player on their team and he's a really good athlete, and, maybe he goes to an event, a showcase event, wherever that may be, and he's kind of in the the top half of that bracket of players. So say there's 100 players and, he's in the top 10, in his metrics, that shows, hey, he's a pretty good athlete. I would say personally, going into that ninth grade year would probably be, that 14U, 15U range is probably where I would say, from and getting with the right organization and getting good reps is so important, because you can go, like I said, you can go play in Florida and Georgia and all these places, but if you're not ready to face that, competition, then, you can kind of be exposed too. So I would say that 8th, 9th grade year is where I would start looking at really, really depending on my kid's age level. That's what I would suggest.
So I'm a parent, and I've got my kid. We're going to start looking for travel organizations. Maybe I call some up and I'm asking them some questions. What are in your opinion, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you need to be thinking about as you're making that decision? Hey, I'm going to go to this organization. I need to go here. What's top the top 2 or 3 things?
Well, I would say how many players that organization carries on that roster. How they have it set up. Some organization. I should say every organization is different. Flood City, really good organization out of Johnstown. I believe they're set up to. They basically have 3 sets of teams in on one team, and what they'll do is they'll split. 1 and 2 will go on the first weekend, and then 2 and 3 will go on the second weekend, and then 3 and 1 will go on the third weekend. So it's basically 2 weekends on, 1 weekend off, is what I've heard and understood. That could be wrong, but they're a good one. But just how many players they're carrying. The most important thing I would say for kids who are trying to be noticed is the college coaches are 90% of the time, looking at a kid offensively. If a kid can hit, if he can drive the ball, for power, and he can run, they're going to find a spot for him, whether that be, if he's a big kid, whether that be first base or corner outfield, being offensively, I think a lot of kids and everyone wants to play defensively, but from a college standpoint, like if your goal is to get noticed, it's, unless you're a catcher, it's really, really hard to get noticed defensively. Like I haven't spoken to one college coach that said, hey, I want to go see this kid play first or play second base because of his defense. I want to see, his footwork around the bag or how he fields a bunt. So, offensively, that's what's going to get you an offer. Like, Lincoln Pack, who plays on our 2023 team, who's committed to West Virginia, I think he's 5'6" or 5'7", 135, 140 pounds, maybe 150 by now. There's no physical attribute that stands out, and you're like, this kid, is just a physical specimen. But what makes him different than a lot of other kids is it seems every at bat he's hitting a double. He's driving a ball.
Double, triple,
double. Yeah. So I mean, that's how he stood out and got his offer last fall in at the West Virginia camp. Was when you drive the ball, as a right-handed hitter, you drive the ball opposite field off the wall. That's going to make coaches say, take notice. So Aaron Jamison's the same way. I mean, he's a little more, physically gifted. He's probably 6'1" by now, 190 pounds. He's very advanced. He's just but again, his bat plays, his arm plays, his glove plays. Lincoln's bat is just very advanced, and college coaches, they'll figure out a place to put him. But to get guys that hit like that, they're hard to find. Guys that just drive the ball in the gaps all the time, it seems like. So
you mentioned rosters being important. So with the Aces, how do you guys normally do rosters? How many guys do you carry? Talk about like your use of POs and maybe bringing kids in for a weekend, because a lot of parents maybe they don't know their whole travel game or how that works. Can you talk a little bit about the roster management piece of it?
Absolutely. So in the fall, we do things differently in the summer than we do the fall. So the summer on our teams, we usually carry about 12 position players. And summer vacations, someone can't make it this weekend, so that usually leaves us right in the 10 to 12 range, which is kind of right where we want to be from a defensive standpoint. Now in the fall, we carry more on our two older teams because usually we're playing colleges. So what I can't do in the fall is I can't tell Coach Little at Potomac State, hey, we're going to have 20 of the best players to come play you, and then show up with 10 guys. I can't get in a position where I'm shorthanded. And there's been some weekends where we were at like 11 or 12. We usually carry about, on our North and South team, we usually carry about 16 to 18 position players, because I can't be in that situation of where we're shorthanded against these colleges. So, but that's the only time we do that. We usually carry about 12. And on the other teams, we carry, the Skidmore and the Crawford teams and Ernie's team, the 23 team. It's usually right around 11 to 12.
So talk a little bit about POs and bringing players in maybe for a weekend. Maybe you got a kid that a college wants to see or something. So, hey, you hook them up.
So we don't the only time we bring in players is if we have an injury, or we have a kid, a couple kids that are going to be out on vacation, or hey, they had something planned, they can't be there, and we're going to be near shorthanded. That's the only time we really look to bring in guys. So some organizations do that frequently, but we're, like I said, I'm more worried about getting the kids as many reps as I can that are there all the time. So we usually don't play in national tournaments. Usually, now that the exemption is this weekend, we're playing in the PBR West Virginia Fall Championships by PBR tournaments. So that's the exception, but we usually don't play in the national tournaments because I'm not trying to make this a business. I'm more worried about getting the kids reps that we have, and I don't feel like we need to take a flight or drive 8 hours to do that. We have done it before with the 23 group, but it's just something I don't like to make a habit, because it's just, I don't see the value in it, and asking a parent to spend $1,000 to go down and
sure
and play in Florida or 1,500 is just a lot. Talk
to me a little bit about the arms. How many POs you carry? How do you handle the arms for tournaments? And
so on the North and South team this fall, and really the summer, the older teams, we usually carry 2 or 3 POs, because we'll have position players that pitch too. So, I want to get all those guys as many innings as we can. So we just really try to plan it out that week. Usually Monday nights, Tuesday around midday, we'll kind of figure out, hey, what's the I'll get with the coach or the POs and say, hey, what day are you able to pitch? A lot of kids have thought, I think, that they wouldn't like that, just pitching, but then they realize they get to show up, an hour before their game. They start.
Once you get a little bit of life of the PO, man, there's no going back after that, buddy.
I was always a fan of being a PO in college, just because it was always fun to me because I knew when I was going to pitch, as a starter, you can get mentally ready for it, and it's just so that's kind of how we do it.
So as you're talking rosters, man, those are pretty tight, pretty small rosters, and parents need to understand you could go on a travel team where there's 23 guys showing up on a weekend, and you paid your money, but maybe you're the amount of time you're going to get on the field maybe doesn't match up with the other guys, and that, man, I hear that from parents and a lot of times if they're not asking that question on the front end, man, they don't know what they're getting into.
Yeah, absolutely, and I always like to be as upfront as I can, with parents, and I'm not running this as a business. I'm running it as an opportunity for kids. We're not the cheapest by any means, and I'm very upfront with parents. You can find cheaper, you can find more expensive, but what you're going to get with us is you're going to get good reps, you're going to play good competition, you're going to get in good events to give your son the best chance to be noticed, to stand out, and put yourself on a platform. And the PBR platform really is a huge sticking point because now more than ever with the limitations, it's coaches are really tuning into what PBR is doing, the live streams.
Oh, it's good stuff, man. I've watched some of that stuff you do. I mean, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, it's
you can actually see what's going on, man. Some of that live stream, I'm watching some of that live stream, and I'm like, it looks like people are like 10,000 yards away. You can't see anything that's going on. It's awful.
Yeah,
you guys did good stuff.
My big sticking point with the and our guy that's done a couple of our live streams, and Ryan out of Allegheny Media in Cumberland, he's been able to get the pitching velocities on the screen. So I think that's the huge sticking point for me. Live streams are very expensive to do because there's a lot that goes into it. But just getting that little number in the screen to where coaches can watch it and they can see, this kid, wow, it looks like he's throwing pretty good. It's not like you're guessing. It's like, okay, well, the screen.
Am I going to pay attention, or do I have time to go fix a sandwich?
Yeah, exactly. So it's been the live stream thing has really worked out well for us, and the kids really enjoy it.
So talk to me a little bit about what the difference between if you head out some weekend, it's a showcase weekend where you're playing games versus an actual tournament where you're competitively trying to win that tournament. A lot of parents don't really understand the difference there and how you guys approach, and maybe you don't approach them differently, but talk a little bit about that aspect, the difference.
So like I said, we mostly most of the time we're playing in showcase events because what that does for us is it allows us to set our pitching, hey, PO 1 is pitching innings 1 through 4 in game 1. So-and-so who's playing shortstop, they're in the first 4 innings is going to pitch inning, 4 through 6. And we got a guy pitching the 7th. So it allows us to, we don't usually do the tournaments, like I said, and the exception is this weekend because we've got all 5 teams in this tournament. So it's been obviously a huge change of pace for me because I've got to go from showcase thinking to, well, these kids, all 5 teams are really competitive, so they all could end up playing in the winners bracket, and it's like, I got to set up pitching, which is
we're
difficult.
Stealing, bunting, pitching changes, man. It's on.
Well, yeah, you got to know the rules, and you can only hit so many guys, and you can have a DH or you can't have a DH, and it's just I got to get all my coaches up to speed with it. But that's why I really like the showcase events, and some kids and parents don't like that, but from an organizational standpoint, and for the kids really, they can get mentally prepared. We don't have to throw a kid who's never thrown or thrown one time in his life in a championship game to try to win a trophy or a plaque,
That no one will ever remember.
for my self-gratification. I never want to put kids in a situation to hurt themselves, and that's just like the prime way to do it, I feel like, is you get to Sunday, you get to the championship game, and you've got no pitching left, and you've got a kid who plays who DHs all the time, and he's literally your only arm that's not sore or tired, and you got to go out there and throw him. So that's why we do showcase tournaments. But
So tell me a little bit about when guys should be looking for travel teams. I'll get calls in the spring. It's middle of high school baseball season. Hey, what's a good travel team to play on this summer? And I'm like, yeah, maybe you might be able to call somebody, get a spot if you're an arm, but when should parents be thinking about making that decision, and how's all that work?
if you're talking on a year-to-year basis, it's crazy to me. Like, I don't agree with it, but a lot of organizations, like right now, which is like September, late August, will do their tryouts for next summer. And I'm yet to have a tryout because I don't think that a kid, I think a lot of organizations miss out on really good players because, a kid might have an off day, or, he might, his arm might be a little stiff from something, or, I want to get the big picture. So that's why I rely on guys like John Lowry Jr., Zach Baldwin, Caleb, with Zach, and those guys I got guys really in all parts of the state that are like Coach Bittinger up in Wheeling. Those guys call me and say, Billy Reap out in Clarksburg. Those guys call me and text me and say, hey, you need to see this kid. He can play for you. Well, and that's they've seen him play and they know he can play, and I trust their opinion. So I don't do tryouts. Some organizations do it and they charge $20 or $30 or whatever. I just don't see the point in that.
If I'm interested in the Aces, how do I go about doing that? What do I do to make that happen?
I would if we've never had any communication, the best way to do it would be to reach out, to me via email or text or call. My number and my email are pretty well known and easy to find. So it would be just to reach out and say, hey, I'm interested. I get a lot of emails that say, hey, when's your tryout? This and that. We're interested in trying out. And then I just got to, kind of got the blanket statement of, hey, we don't do tryouts, but, I'd love to see you, if I can see you, or if, depending on where they're from, and who's recommending them. I go mostly, 80-85% probably on recommendations if I haven't seen the kid. But obviously this past year was a wash with high school, but the year before, that was enjoyable for me, was to go out on a Wednesday night, and see St. Albans Hurricane play. And then, I get to see those guys in a competitive game, and, you notice players, and, you start asking questions,
and you're all over the state, man. You're everywhere.
I love going. Like, it's fun to me. Like, people tell me all the time, like, hey, I don't know how you drive, and do all this stuff, but like, to me, it's like, I enjoy going to high school games and midweek games and seeing guys and interacting with the coaches. And, if Coach Sutphin at Hurricane, texts me and says, hey, there's we got a guy I think you'd be interested in. Well, I know he's a good player because, there's a lot of good players in Hurricane. And if Coach Sutphin's reaching out and saying, hey, you need to look at this guy, then I know that, that's a guy I need to see. So, but it's been a lot of fun, and Brandy, my fiance, probably wishes I was home more, during those high school seasons, but it's all worth it. She understands. She's been great, so I'm lucky.
So I check it out. I've talked to some coaches. I made my decision. I'm on a travel team. Things aren't going as I expected. I'm not getting enough playing time. Coach told me this. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times. What's the right way if I'm a player or a parent to handle those situations where my expectations are not being met? What's the right steps?
From my standpoint, the right step would be, for the player to have a conversation with either the coach or the head of the organization, or, first he needs to talk to the coach, and kind of see if you can work it out that way. If you don't get the response or the answer you want, then, kind of go up the ladder and just try to understand a better, get a better answer, for you. But, what a huge red flag is if a kid plays for multiple teams, within a short period of time. So like if you play on 4 travel teams in 2 years, then that's a huge red flag.
Especially if it's not like you said, they're not going from like, hey, from this level travel team to like a national team or something prestigious.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, if you bounce back and forth, that's usually a huge red flag. And no organization had, guy like me, we don't want to. Me personally, I've never reached out to a kid off of Twitter video and said, hey, come play for me. In the bio it says, hey, I play for, X team, and then I'm not reaching out. I've never reached out to a player and said, hey, come play for me over this other team. Some organizations do that. I despise that. I think it's very low class to do, because not only from the player standpoint, but it leaves the team that is expecting him to play. It leaves them shorthanded, and it's just a very, to me, it's a very unprofessional thing to do. But like I said, I'm sure I have different mindset than other people. So, and that's fine. I would never do that. So it's just, the most important, aspect for me is getting kids that I can help, that want to be here. And, I'll talk to a kid. I tell kids or parents and players in our team meetings every time we have them, I'll talk to a kid all day, all night about, hey, it's kind of different for us because we kind of script things defensively and offensively. So like we script our innings out, hey, you're going to play innings 1, 3, 5, and 7. Sure. You're going to play innings 2, 4, 6. So, we're very open about that in the beginning, and so we don't usually get a lot of complaints about it. But when we do, I'll talk to a kid all day long about why we do that or the reason. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to talk to a parent about it. One, because the parent's not the one who's playing, so I'd much rather talk to the kid who's playing and get his point of view. But 2, kids are getting to that, you're getting the age, 15, 16, 17 years old where you're a year or 2 away from, becoming an adult. So you need to learn to deal with things that you don't agree with.
It's really practice for those conversations you're about to have as an adult with a college coach. I mean, this communication that you have here during this travel time, it's really practice for having a voice and being able to speak, person to person with a coach and have that conversation. And if parents are coming in, they're stealing that opportunity for kids to try to work stuff out and get prepared for having those conversations.
Yeah, because whether now you're dealing in baseball, but once you get to be an adult and you're in the working world and your boss asks you to do something that you don't agree with, then you need to be able to have that conversation. You can't have your parent call your boss. You got to be able to figure that out. So I'm I'm a big proponent. I make it very clear that, if a kid has a problem, I need to talk to the kid. I'll talk to him all day long. We'll figure it out, but I'm not going to talk to parents about stuff that kids can and should handle.
Tell me a little bit about the recruiting timeline. So if you've got, and maybe put it in terms of if you've got a national recruit, when that's happening with that kid, as more than maybe a regional recruit, maybe a small D1 recruit, and then like a D2, D3 JUCO guy.
So like a Power Five, from what I've seen, Coach Saban's at WVU. Right now it's the 2021 class is getting ready to graduate. Power Fives are usually about 2 years out, give or take a couple spots. So they're into the 23-24 class, as what I've understood from my conversations from him. Now, if a guy pops up or they lose a recruit for whatever reason, there might still be an opportunity to.
So they're looking freshman, sophomore.
Freshman, yeah. So Power Fives are usually freshman, sophomore. The mid-level D1s or low-level D1s and high-level D2s. From what I've seen, they're 20, late 21 and 22 class. So, they might have a couple spots left on, at this time of the year, they might have a couple spots left in the 21 class, but it's mostly they're probably moving on to the 22s. And then, the D2, D3, JUCO, they're usually, the senior class is kind of where they're, you won't see those guys commit a lot of, hardly ever commit guys that aren't graduating that year. So this year's 21, so they're all into the 21 grad class, and that's kind of usually how, from what I've seen, and that, it might be different other places, but from the coaches I've spoken with, that's kind of where we're at.
So given our current environment with what's going on, with D1 coaches not being able to come watch you play, D2 coaches, and just the current environment not being able to get on a lot of campuses, what advice do you have for, let's start at the bottom, for freshman, sophomore guys that are competing, that are maybe starting to look into reaching out to coaches? What advice do you have for those young guys?
Well, the biggest piece of advice I have is to communicate through. Obviously, they can't, Division I schools like a WVU or a Texas, they can't. You pick up the phone and call them, and you're not. It's not September 1st of your junior year, then they can't respond back to you, or they can't initiate contact. So, you can pick up the phone and call them. They're probably not going to answer, but from that standpoint, I would say, if you have that kind of talent, really, getting as much good video as you can send. Like you mentioned, not the video that you can't really tell what's going on. Trying to get, for hitters, trying to get your open side of you hitting, in a game. That's, usually good footage, or right behind home plate. To where you can kind of see the trajectory of the ball and everything. But what I've come to understand is hitters or coaches are really looking for, from a positional standpoint, they're looking for guys that can hit, and they want to see the swing. So that's usually a good way to get noticed. But sending emails and communicating, especially now, sending emails with video. And good references. So, what thing we offer with the Aces is, hey, if you play for the Aces and you send an email and you're more than welcome to put my name and email and phone number on. And, I like to think that I have a pretty good reputation. of being honest. So, coaches reach out to me all the time. Kids at the Aces kids, a lot of them are really tuned into sending emails and communicating with coaches. So I get a lot of calls, emails about, players that reach out, and, that's always a good way to start and get the ball rolling for you.
Sure. So for you, where you sit, kind of looking out, what's the most rewarding part of what you do with the Aces, and what's the most challenging? Maybe start with the challenging and end with the positive.
Challenging, man. I honestly, the most challenging thing for me probably is just I'm not able to be everywhere at once. Especially getting into the tournament side of things with PBR West Virginia. I have a few of our teams playing a lot of our PBR West Virginia events, and that's great. That's a selling point because I'm going to get to see you every time you come to a PBR West Virginia tournament. I'm going to be there, to scout and to see you play. So that's probably the most challenging. Is just I'm getting to the point where I've got a couple guys that I can trust to, if they say, hey, I'm going to do something, they do it. And that's, like I said before, that's a big part for me, is finding guys that I can trust. And then, the most rewarding, I'll just give you an example. I had a kid come up to me last week as I was leaving the ballpark, and he was just, he was kind of timid, and it kind of threw me off guard because I was putting something in my car, and I turned around and he was like right there. But, he was like, hey, coach, I just wanted to thank you because, I spoke to my first school, 2 days ago, and they heard about me from playing on this team. And, I'm really interested in going to school there, and they're really interested in me. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity. So for me, like, that is the best.
Money.
I get really fired up about that. And just seeing kids get a chance, the kid that I'm talking about from Central West Virginia, I'd never heard of him until late this summer. He's a good player. He's got a brother who's a good player. And it's just like, I can't, it's a small state, so you'd think I'd be able to cover everything, but I still can't cover everything, but I can cover a bigger part. But that's why I really rely on guys I trust to really refer these guys that need the exposure and that I can help. And just to see, just to talk to him and just to see the excitement on his face of, hey, I'm a senior. We lost our season last year, and I didn't get a chance to play really this summer. And, I just spoke to my first college coach, and I'm going to go on a visit, and I'm really excited. Like, to me, that means the world to me. And it's always, it's always good. It was really exciting to get our first Division I commits, last fall with Aaron Jameson and Lincoln Pack. That was really exciting for me. But for the kid that maybe can't play at that level, and for him to get a chance, because the coach told him, hey, I heard of you through Josh and the Aces. That's the best for me. So
And I tell you what, I mean, and I'll tell you, from being a West Virginia guy, man, I appreciate it because I know there's a lot of guys in the past that could have went and played and didn't because they didn't have those opportunities and didn't get that exposure. So it's huge, man. It's huge.
yeah, I enjoy it. It's something I have a big passion for, and I grew up with my dad as I was growing up, and he always taught me to really just don't ever think you're better than somebody else. And I've always taken that to heart, and being able to help kids has just been something that I never, you never think you're going to have the opportunity to really make a impression on somebody, but we've had a lot of success with helping kids, and it's not all me by any means. Chase Illig, Josh Crawford, Tyler Skidmore, John Lowry Jr., Zach Baldwin, Caleb Stewart, Charlie Kuykendall. Like those are all the guys that make this what it is. I get the credit, which is great. That's awesome. But those guys are really the ones that make it happen, and I couldn't do it without those guys.
So why should a parent or a player become an ace? What's the selling point?
Well, from my standpoint, the biggest thing is, I'm not always just going to pat your kid on the butt and say, hey, you're doing great. Hey, you wrote your check. You paid your money. Thanks for being here. I expect certain thing, and we go over this in the meeting. There's a certain level of expectation with playing with the Appalachian Aces. And when you're not playing with the Appalachian Aces and you're wearing an Aces hat or you're wearing an Aces shirt, and we had a situation this summer where some kids played with us and then they were playing on another team and they were wearing, Aces stuff, and they were kind of acting like goofballs. And the coach that they were playing called me and was like, hey, these guys are wearing Aces stuff and they were acting, crazy. So, I called up the kids and was like, hey, if you're going to wear, and we go over this, but if you're going to wear our logo, then you need to, respect it. And if you don't want to respect it, then take it off and don't wear it. But, it's bigger than any one player, and it's bigger than me. And, if my reputation is ruined, then, this is all for naught. So I'm just a big believer in respecting the brand, and, we're not where we want to be yet from a brand standpoint, but we're getting there. I see, teams, kind of, or organizations on Twitter talk about, we've been doing this for X amount of years, and, 20 years we've been doing this, and blah, blah, blah. And that's great. It's awesome. But, come talk to me in 20 years and see where we're at and what we've done. So we just haven't had the time yet, the sheer years, but, it's starting to get, almost all of our kids have an opportunity to play at the next level, whether they accept it or not. So that's what it's about for me is, coaches are tuning into what we're doing. We had 4 head coaches at Aces weekend a couple weekends ago. So what I told the kids and the parents is, you can go to all these camps you want, but decision makers are the guys that are going to offer scholarships. And there's 4 of them sitting over there. Those are the guys who say, hey, we want to offer you X amount of dollars to come play for us. So, and there's nothing wrong with, assistants and such going to camps. I think that's great. But from a parent standpoint and a kid standpoint, going and playing in front of decision makers is what you want to do. And that's what we provide,
Awesome.
is the opportunity to do that.
Dude, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you and what you do, man. For what you do for West Virginia and the guys in the baseball here, man, it's such a big difference. And just talking to folks 3 or 4 years ago between now as to what's happening in the state baseball wise, man, you're killing it. So I keep rolling.
Marty, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for everything you do and promoting what parents need to do, and people need to really tune into what you're saying, because you've got a good idea, you've lived it, and you know what's going on. So,
Josh Kuykendall, appreciate you, buddy. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right.